Hi everyone, I'm Michelle Taylor, mental health therapist, and today I'm going to be talking about a metaphor that I made up called the bean jar. Now, the bean jar is something that I came up with when I was running a self-esteem group, and what I wanted to accomplish with this was to come out with a way to look at your thoughts and your feelings as temporary and as something that you don't have to really grasp onto as truth. So what I came up with was I had some mason jars, and this is good for children, adolescents, and adults. I've used it with all different kinds of populations. I've used it for anxiety, depression, PTSD symptoms, any sort of irrational negative beliefs that people have about themselves. So it's really helpful, and especially with little kids. Little kids really love the bean jar activity, so I hope you enjoy it. So first you take a bean jar. Well, I call this a bean jar. It's a mason jar. You can use any kind, any size. And the reason I like the mason jar is because it's tactile. People can open and close it, play with it in their hands. It's pretty durable, and cheap. So you can use it in the classroom. You can use it in therapy or with your children. This is a great method. So one of the things that I did was I went online and I looked on Google for how many thoughts we have in a day. And I came up with something around, in my article it says something around 60 to 70 to 80,000 thoughts a day, which, breaking it down, that's probably about 60 a minute. And so that means we have a thought every second. So what I did was I went around my house trying to figure out what I could fill in these jars to represent thoughts. And the thing that I came up with were some dried beans because they were cheap and colorful. Some people have used jelly beans before, but they're a little more expensive and people usually eat them. So I use beans, and so that's why this is called the bean jar. So when I start this with little kids or adults, I usually say this represents your brain, and right now it's empty. So this may be like if you're brain dead or before you're born, stuff like that. And it happens, but generally you're going to have something in here. So the next step is to talk about the 60 thoughts a minute rule. And it's hard to believe that we have 60 thoughts a minute. So the first thing that I do, and it's a tactile exercise, is I give them a jar full of beans. It doesn't matter what kind. And with this one, what I want them to do is to see how many thoughts they can name in a minute. And so I'll show you that in a second. But basically use any sort of beans, and you're going to be pulling the beans out one by one with your person that you're doing this with, and it can be any thought. And what you'll find is you won't get 60 thoughts. There's no way. It's hard. And so then you kind of process afterwards, why did we only get so many thoughts? When I first did this, I think I only got 10, and it was really hard for me to come up with more than 10. Now after, I've gotten better at coming up with more thoughts because if you read in the article, I come up with more neutral thoughts. So I've gotten really good with this practice, and that's really essentially where you want to be. So the first one is the minute jar. So you want to put 60 in a jar, roughly, and then have whoever's doing this count or just say thoughts as they come and pull out a bean and put it on the table, just one by one. And little kids can do this, adults can do this, no problem. So I'll show you that one. Okay, so this is the minute drill with the bean jar, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a timer for 1 minute, and you're going to have whoever you're doing this with or yourself. You could do this with yourself. This is a good practice for just getting yourself calm and grounding. So what you're going to do is you're going to set a timer for 1 minute, and you're going to have a jar of beans. You can use erasers, whatever you want, and you're going to pull out one bean for every thought. So I'm going to give this a whirl. I think the max I've gotten is 15, so we'll try. So here we go. Let's start. I opened the jar. This is a bean. This is red. I'm doing an exercise. I am on video. I am running out of things to say already. This is a bean. This is a table. It sounds funny when it goes on the table. I dropped it pretty fast. I am running out of things to say again. I'm afraid that this isn't going very well. I'm not going to beat my record. I'm not going to beat my record. I'm looking at the clock. I noticed that there's 29 seconds. There's a bigger bean there. I keep saying and I keep saying and. I'm in a room. I'm actually doing pretty good. I keep saying I have 5 seconds. I said Okay, so there we go. I have, let's see here if you can see this. I have 1, 2, 3, oh, let's stop this. Stop. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. That's a record. I have gotten better at it, but to be honest, when I first did this, I maybe got 10. So you'll notice that some of the things that I said I repeated, and that's okay. Some people might repeat, and I think that kind of represents what rumination is. And when you're ruminating on a certain thought, and I noticed that one of my thoughts was that I kept saying and that I might not finish very well. But then I noticed also, and this is what you do with who you're doing this with this too, kind of review what the thoughts were. I'm noticing that a lot of my thoughts were kind of doubting and feeling like I'm not going to be able to do this. So that's a little bit of a negative thought. There was a positive thought in there of, I'm actually doing pretty good in there. I'm doing pretty good. And there are also some neutral thoughts, which is what you're going to be doing, is breaking them down in between positive, negative, and neutral thoughts. The neutral thoughts were, this is a table, this bean feels heavy, I said However, for me, when I say that might be a negative thought because I don't want to say so I kind of make myself feel guilty about saying To somebody else, that might just be a neutral thought. And that's something you want to explore too. Like, what exactly does this thought mean to you? Is it a positive, negative, or neutral thought? Like, some people might hear, I'm going to lose my job, and that might be a very negative thought. And some people who hate their job might be like, yes, finally, this is great. I'm excited. Some people might look at it as, it is what it is, kind of a thing. So just exploring what your thoughts are that come out. And so that's the first one. The first exercise is the minute drill, is just keep naming thoughts in 1 minute. And I had 23, and like I said, you're supposed to have one thought every second. There's no way I could say a thought every second. I try really hard, but it's not going to happen. So it's really important to know, why did I pick out those 23 thoughts when I have another, 37 that I didn't pick out, that are going on, that I just am not aware of. So really cool drill. It really does tell you a lot about what is important to you in that moment, and help you to identify that you need to focus a little bit more on the neutrals when you're feeling a little too negative, which we'll get into in a second. The next phase of the bean jar is to kind of go through what their thoughts were when they pulled them out of the jar. So usually people will go, this is really hard. I don't know if I can do this. I wish I knew how to do this better. This is a bean, stuff like that. And what you'll start to notice is there's going to be some self-doubt in there. There's going to be some joy in there, like, I'm really good at this. Those kinds of thoughts come through. And what I start to do in a beginning level of the bean jar is to break it down into positive and negative thoughts. This isn't an advanced way to look at things because we can't categorize everything into positive and negative. There's all sorts of things in between. But for now, we're just going to do positive and negative. So a positive thought would be, I'm really good at this game. A negative thought would be, I really am horrible at this game and I'm going to not be able to do this. So that's positive and negative. So what I've done is I've created 2 separate beans to represent positive and negative thoughts. This is the negative. They're kidney beans. They're very big and red. And these are the positive thoughts. You can use anything. I mean, you can use lima beans, whatever you want. But I like the black-eyed peas because they're a little smaller and they're whiter, and there's a little dot of blackness on them. I don't know. I just like them. So anyways, the kidney beans are a great thing to use for negative feelings and emotions and thoughts because they're giant. They're big. So what happens is people will generally pick out negative thoughts more than they will positive thoughts. And when you ask whoever you're using this with, ask them what they think about these beans. Like, what do you notice is the difference about these beans? And they'll generally say, oh, these are bigger, they're red, they're heavier, you pick them out faster. And with the white beans, they'll be like, oh, they're a little smaller, they're harder to grab, they're, just have them observe it. And then that's a metaphor for your positive and negative thoughts. It's so easy to grab onto negative thoughts because they're so heavy, they feel bigger, and they're just like ugly little gremlins, and they just come out, out of all the beans in your mind, they come out faster. So this is a great exercise just to observe what are the differences between positive and negative thoughts using beans. Then the next step is what I do is I add in lentil beans. And what lentil beans represent are what's called neutral thoughts. And when you're working with positive and negative thoughts, what you really want to do is you want to reduce too many positive thoughts and too many negative thoughts. You want to be able to have some control over the way you view these thoughts. And what I like to say is you want to see all of them equally. You want to not judge them. You want to have compassion for them. You're not trying to get rid of all the negative thoughts. They're just as important as positive and neutral thoughts. But you're just looking at them the same way as you would a neutral thought. Now, neutral thoughts are something that you can practice daily. And what I use it as, it's a form of grounding. Sometimes with clients, I will use grounding like naming colors of things around the room. So I'll be like, green wall, this is a brown tree, blue shirt, silver can top, and you just keep naming colors with things. That's a form of grounding. And what that does is it separates emotion from logic, and that's what neutral thoughts do. So when we're talking about that we have 60 thoughts a minute, most of those thoughts are neutral thoughts. It's just that we don't really recognize that we're doing that. Like when I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm spitting out all these words, they're all thoughts. But at the same time, my mind is still processing that I'm in a room, there's lights on me, there's a camera on me, I'm talking to people, I'm holding this, it's heavy, all these things that we may not recognize that we're thinking, but we are thinking. So those are neutral thoughts. And these are the ones that we really need to spend more time focusing on when we're feeling too much of this or too much of this, because it basically kind of brings us back to center. It grounds us. So that's the next step, is to have them pick out one of these jars and say, what do you think represents the last minute of your life? Generally, they'll say, this one, because they've had a time listening to you talking pretty much. But then you say, is there ever been a time that in your life that you've had a minute that looks like this? And yeah, there is. There's times when you fail an exam, or you didn't get a job, or you got fired, or you just feel sad or anxious or scared. Yeah, there's lots of minutes that look like this. And there's lots of minutes that look like this. But there's very rare moments where we're just kind of like focusing on neutral stuff. And that's really where this is going, is we're trying to be a little more mindful of the neutral stuff, because that's what takes away the heaviness of these right here. So the next step that I want to show you is an exercise that you can do to separate those thoughts and to kind of slow yourself down. And this is really great for people who have high anxiety and who have high depression symptoms, like they're having negative thoughts about themselves, and to reduce those. Because you'll find that when you pick out and name those feelings and those thoughts, that they actually kind of go away. And the goal is to try to pick out more neutral thoughts when you're in these moments of, these kinds of minutes, is to go and find these thoughts. Because generally, what your life is going to look like overall is a big jar full of a lot of color, different colors of beans, different sizes. But in there's a lot of neutrals, there's a couple of reds in there. If you were to show this to somebody, at the end of the day, this is how you want your life to look. You want so many colors and experiences, and just to look at it as it is. Like, yeah, there were some rough times in there, but I also had some good times. I also noticed the things around me, and, there were, some years that were really good and some years that were really bad. But overall, my life looks like this. And this is the goal right here. This is really where the compassion and the work is with the people you're doing this with. So I'm going to show you a couple of other exercises to do. Okay, the next drill is separating positive, negative, and neutral thoughts. So what I want my person that I'm working with to do is to have an empty jar to start, and they'll open it, play with it, feel it, and you say, this is you. This is your feelings and your thoughts that have happened in the last, sometimes I'll start with a minute, but if there's nothing that's been going on in a minute, I'll say, okay, tell me in the last day, what do you think your thoughts have been like? And then you have a jar full of neutral thoughts, the green ones. You have a jar full of positive thoughts, which are the white ones. And then you have a jar full of negative thoughts, which are the big, giant red ones. So what I do is I have, it could be a kid, an adult, whoever, have them grab out some thoughts. And it just kind of represents what their life has been like in the last day. You could do the last year. You could do the last 5 years. It doesn't matter. You pick it out. So let's say I had a really crummy day yesterday and, most of my thoughts were red. So I'm going to grab a lot of reds, put them in here, and maybe I had a couple of positive thoughts about myself, but it was really difficult. And of course, you're going to have a lot of neutral thoughts, especially when you just kind of zone out. So I'm going to put a lot of green thoughts in there. And then you just have them look at it and you say, what's your experience with that? What does it feel like to look at this and go, oh, this was my day? Does it feel permanent? And has there ever been a time when, life stayed like this for a while? It wasn't really changing. And what did that look like? And then you start looking at this individually and you say, I wonder if you could just kind of pull out some thoughts that you remember having. So, they'll start grabbing random things like, I have a paper due tomorrow. I'm gonna do really poorly on it and I'm gonna have an F. My teacher doesn't like me. I have some friends that make me feel good, but there's this one guy who really treats me bad and bullies me. My parents don't really understand me. I wish that I had better friends. I'm worried that I'm not going to be successful or go to college. There's so much pressure on me to be the best kid, and I can't be. They don't know what I've been going through. I really like being online and playing video games, so that really makes me feel happy. So as you see, they'll start naming things that happen without you even having to provoke it. It is actually a really good tool to kind of take their mind off of the experience with the person. Like, a lot of parents have trouble talking with their kids, and if they kind of use these as a talking tool, they're not talking to the parent, they're talking to themselves using beans, and they're able to feel it and kind of simplify it when it really does feel so big. Like these red beans feel really big, and to just name it kind of takes off the pressure of how big it is, and you kind of look at it and go, oh, actually it's not that bad. I thought it felt really a lot bigger. So this is a great tool, and you can ask them to create their own bean jars of their thoughts and emotions, and what it does is it kind of just pulls you outside from a third person's perspective. And that's really the goal here, is to be mindful of your thoughts and not judge them, and just look at them as, okay, that's just what happened. And you have some compassion for it. Like, yeah, man, that must have been a really bad day or a really bad year. And you learn to have compassion for yourself rather than making yourself feel guilty for feeling these things, which is definitely not what you want to do. You have compassion for yourself, and you become your own therapist or your own parent or your own friend. And that's really the goal for the bean jar, is to be able to analyze, observe, and process and have compassion for your experience and not judge yourself. So thanks for listening, and I appreciate any feedback or comments that you have. If you have any ideas for how else you can use the bean jars, I'd love it. I am still finding new ways to use them, and I enjoy coming up with new metaphors for them every day. And in fact, most of my clients and the people I use them with come up with the metaphors themselves, and I just kind of use it again and again and again. So please comment below, share with your other parents, friends, therapists. I'd love to share this with everybody. It's something everybody can do, and it's a cheap, easy way to express yourself. Okay, thank you.